Thank you for joining me today. I'm Madeline Blair, and this is Unlocked, a show all about opening the resilient leader in you. So often, we're challenged to reinvent ourselves. Today, we're going to talk about how to approach that challenge and how we might do it. And don't forget our final segment, Grounds for Thought, so stay tuned for what's brewing. Now let's meet our guest who'll be talking about this reinvention of yourself into a Renaissance human. Let me bring Bruce on. Hello, Bruce Cryer.
Hello, Dr. Madeline Blair. Nice to see you.
Good to see you. All right, I just tell our audience a little bit. Some of them may not have necessarily watched last week. So Bruce brings more than 4 decades of experience into business innovation, optimal performance, and artistic expression to everything he does. Through roles as diverse as actor, singer, dancer, writer, photographer, educator, mentor, business developer, marketing strategist, leadership coach, and executive. Bruce has gained valuable tools and lessons to help any leader in any phase of their growth, both professionally and personally. His passion for the intersection between optimal health, human performance, and the heart-brain-breath connection found a home when he became a founding director of the acclaimed HeartMath Institute and later CEO of HeartMath for 11 years. His clients include people like NASA and Kaiser Permanente and Mayo Clinic, the World Bank, Unilever, and NHS, Cathay Pacific Airways, Mandarin Oriental Hotels, and Yosemite National Park. In addition, Bruce is 14 years cancer-free and 13 years dancing and hiking on titanium hips. He also has put out an album of original songs called Renaissance Human, which was released in 2018. He also has created an album of original songs called Renaissance Human, released in 2018. And of course, he is the author of From Chaos to Coherence. I got to show people this I think it's a beautiful book cover. You know, some book covers aren't very pretty, but this one is lovely.
Thank you.
All right. So, Bruce, welcome back to Unlocked.
Great to be back. I look forward to the part 2 of our conversation.
All right. This one's going to be on this aspect of the Renaissance human. I love the word Renaissance. You know, we always think of Michelangelo, and that's the name that always comes up with Renaissance. But a few years ago, I was named a Renaissance leader by a particular group, and I was quite honored. And I had to ask them, why did you do this? And they said, well, it's because you do so many different things, Madeline. And I'm sitting here thinking of all the things you have done. So I think you're a Renaissance leader too. But now let's talk about this business of reinventing yourself as a Renaissance humor. Now, we asked people before or the end of our last session to think about the question of, what do I want to reinvent in me? I wonder if we could just sort of ask that question again and just go from there in terms of what does this reinvention mean?
You bet. Well, let me give a couple examples. I had a lady reach out to me a few years ago who had been chief nurse of a huge health system in California, Kaiser Permanente. And she had done that job for many years, and she had decided to take a completely different system out in Hawaii. And this sounded marvelous. It sounded, wow, you're going to live in Kauai as a chief nurse. After being there a little while, however, it felt very provincial to her. Nothing like the sophistication of the big Kaiser system, the national system. And she reached out to me and she said, and we'd known each other for some years. She said, I feel like I got to reinvent myself. I'm about to get my PhD, and you seem to have learned a lot about reinvention. I think you could help me. And I said, well, I have. And let's get started. So in her case, it was pretty big. It was a move back to the mainland. She didn't want to be so far away from family and everything. as idyllic as that could sound. And it was feeling like, well, there's something next for me, and I'm not quite sure what that is. But for her, it was mostly career. But I think, as I suggested it last week, and what I would ask your listening audience now is, what is not working in your life? Where is there friction? Where is the friction in relationships? Like maybe there's an approach of why this keeps happening. Is there a set of relationships that all have similar problems? And so what really needs to change is, what's the common denominator of all these relationships that aren't working well? That would be you. Okay, maybe there's something that needs to be reinvented, upgraded about how you're approaching relationships. Other cases, it could be health. It could be a realization that there's a family history. I'll give you an example of mine. I have lost four direct family members to neurological disease, three to Alzheimer's, one to Lou Gehrig's disease. So there's definitely a tendency in my family, two brothers and both parents, to have some issues neurologically. About 7 or 8 years ago, I started really wanting to study it when my brother was diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment, as it was called. And I started getting into, what do I need to do differently in my diet, but also in my, what can I do to boost my brain? I need to pay attention to this. This is a thing. It wasn't a thing 5 years ago. I was never concerned about brain issues. Suddenly, okay, it's all around me. So that drove me to what do I need to upgrade in my health, my approach to my brain longevity, et cetera. So reinvention can cover any kind of area. For a lot of people, it's, my life's not working. The job's not doing it for me anymore. I can't just work for a paycheck anymore. I've got to, yes, there's a whole range of possible reasons. And, the term reinvention is, to me, more of a corporate sounding word, but upgrade is another way to look at it. To me, it comes out of the recognition that we're all born to give birth to new parts of ourselves. I mean, we've heard many stories of, this is going to date me, but Grandma Moses, who was in our childhood, Madeline, she didn't start painting until she was in her 70s.
That's right.
And she was trotted out there as an example of, it's not like your life is over because you're 40 or 50. Grandma Moses became a world famous painter starting in her 70s. Right. So it's kind of that idea, but not just about being artistic. It's about, well, what's the next phase? Maybe there's something entirely new that would really make our hearts sing and could create more impact for other people's lives. And that's what the whole question of reinvention, it can encompass all of that. So it can be as broad as a whole life change and all the facets that come with that, or it can be as simple as, what do I need to change because there's clearly a family tendency here, and I want to minimize that.
I particularly liked the word friction, because certainly people in, let's say, their 30s, their bodies are probably just fine. I think I remember in my 30s, I could do anything.
Yeah.
I was immortal. And so that's not an issue. In fact, even families haven't aged enough that you have those other kinds of issues. But there are little things that create friction in their day-to-day work or their day-to-day lives. And I love the fact that you can just think about where are those friction points. And I also like reinvention of yourself. You're not trying to say, go fix the situation, but fix something or change something in yourself so that you can deal with it. Or did I hear that wrong?
Yeah, no, that is it. And I guess where my philosophy comes in is also that I believe, like the Grandma Moses, she wasn't necessarily reinventing. She wasn't necessarily changing something. Maybe she had to stop doing something in order to have the time to start painting. Maybe that happened. But to me, she's a perfect example. She had that capacity in her. It didn't suddenly arrive on a bolt of lightning. She had the capacity to be a phenomenal painter. She maybe didn't know that. Maybe she secretly thought she could and didn't have the courage until she was in her 70s. Whatever is the reason, yeah. I believe we are born to continue to grow parts of ourselves that often can surprise us. I was not a theater kid. I did not grow up wanting to be on stage. Not at all. Farthest thing from my mind. So to find myself having the lead role in the longest running musical in the world at age 19, it was like, how did I get here? How did this happen? I wasn't like some of my friends who were all into theater. I like, oh, it's nice, it's fun, but how did this happen? So there was a capacity in me. I had no idea.
You have to tell me what the show was.
The show was called The Fantastics.
The Fantastics. Okay.
It was open for 55 years in New York City.
Wow.
55 years. I was not in it for 55 years.
I was going to say you probably weren't.
About 2 years, a total of about 800 performances.
Wow.
So it's a lot of shows, night after night after night after night after night.
That's right. And you always have to look fresh.
And you have to look fresh. And actually, it's a great example of a isolated type of reinvention. When I first went in the show, I had never done any show more than 3 or 4 performances. And I now had 64 to do in 8 weeks. It was my summer job, literally, to be in the longest running musical in the world between semesters of college. But doing the 7th performance, the 10th performance, the 12th performance, I was out of my depth. I had how do I do this? And I had to find it every night. I had to find new energy every single night. And that was not easy at first. But then after a while, you realize, oh, I can create that. I can invent a feeling of freshness. I have to do different things different nights. I had to have certain routines that would kind of get me up, get my energy up there, so I'd be more spontaneous. So I had to learn how to be able to do it over and over and over again without looking like I'd done it over and over and over again.
Yeah.
It needed to look fresh. I was playing a 19-year-old kid. I needed to be like full of himself and full of life and all that. Yeah.
Wow. I love that. I love that story. And that you had to teach yourself what you needed to do to be fresh. I'll never forget going to a performance by a Shakespeare company. And it was, I mean, I love Shakespeare. And I just enjoy that, seeing how people interpret it.
Yes.
But this particular company was from England. And so I thought, this is really going to be great. But the whole performance was choreographed, did not look fresh. And it was so disappointing. So I loved your example of being fresh. All right. So, what is it, though, that you're really trying to address when you say to people, look for areas where you can reinvent? What is it that people have to, once they find that little moment or place, they say, this is where I really want to focus myself? What is it that they have to focus on? What do they do?
Well, I think there's a lot of dimensions depending upon what they uncover. So let's say they realize I really need to change career. My job, I appreciate the place I work. I appreciate the money, but I've always wanted to run an Airbnb or run a B&B, or I've always wanted to be a writer and coach other writers or whatever. There's some practical questions like, okay, let's say you set yourself up as the host of a B&B, or you set yourself up as a writer. And so there's some practical things like, well, can you do that now? Do you have a runway of a year's worth of salary effectively that you've saved so you could take your time before you start to earn any income? So there's some practical considerations of, is it something that you need to gradually move into so that you keep the income you currently have going for a while, so that it's not causing us massive stress? Because when you make a significant change, when I stepped down as CEO of this organization, HeartMath, that you cited, I had some money that made it easier to exit the full-time position and give my body some time to heal, because this was at the tail end of all the health issues, but also kind of not have the tremendous added burden of cutting off what I'd just done without new income being set up yet. So that I made the decision when I did, because it seemed like healing was enough to add the extra stress of trying to invent a whole nother business coming out of what I had been doing for 20 years. That was too much. So, doing it in a sensible way, so you're not adding enormous stress, adding friction, to use that word again.
Yeah.
I think it's a big deal. But I think one of the most fundamental questions is what truly makes your heart sing. And that isn't necessarily just, like in my case, that phrase became alive for me when my dear friend of mine and myself, Gary Malkin, started doing what we call keynote performances together. And they were themed around this phrase, what makes your heart sing? And so we would speak and we would sing. We were both really good singers. He's a brilliant pianist and composer. We would do these performances that were also keynote talks. So we would engage people to ask themselves, and these were healthcare audiences primarily. We weren't trying to get them to go out of their career into a whole new career. We were just trying to help them re-inspire, reinvent their inside of themselves. Like, why did you even get into healthcare in the first place? It wasn't for the fame, the hours, or the pay. So there was something deeper.
Yeah.
And maybe you've lost that because the system is chaotic in this country. So I got it. I understand why. But we're trying to get you back into reinvent, restart, re-engage that passion that you had in the first place. So that's part of a process, is to really tune into what would make my heart sing. Now, sometimes what would make my heart sing is completely impractical. What would make my heart sing was having a lead role on the Met, at the Met in New York City. Well, that's not going to happen. that's unless it's a concert of aging Oberlin alumni who never actually were opera singers, but had a classical training. I mean, if such a concert was happening, yeah, maybe I could sing at the Met. So a certain practicality is part of the process, but why do you even want to reinvent? Because something's not making your heart sing. And again, it may be a combination of factors. It may be the job, it may be the boss, it may be the hours, it may be the endless stress. There's never enough time. There's never enough appreciation. So I think it's getting clear on what do I really want to do. For a lot of people, I think the urge to reinvent is because they feel like they're not making impact. They're not changing other people's lives. They're not supporting other people enough. So it's not so satisfying. Maybe their job is more analytical or more behind the scenes, and they feel like it's so far removed from actual impact on someone's life. And you want to have that. You want to feel that what I'm doing is helping another person. I think that's a big part of why we would even consider reinventing or birthing new parts of ourselves to make ourselves feel whole.
Okay. Alas, it's always that first question. What is it that you want to do when you go to a workshop? Okay. In our last session, we talked about the heart-brain connection and how important that is. Now that we know or have a sense of what we have to think about in terms of where we want to reinvent, I think it might be good to go back to some of that earlier stuff that we talked about and really connect it to what you call the strength, balance, and flexibility that we need in our lives, particularly as we age, because a Grandma Moses had to have a healthy body at least to do what she did.
Yes. Yeah, those three words you just mentioned, strength, balance, and flexibility, are ones that I try to live by in terms of my health, because I had hip replacement. I had to regain balance. I had to regain strength in muscles that had been weakened for more than a decade. So having balance again, having flexibility again. Once I had these new titanium hips put in, you're not necessarily flexible because all the main muscles have just gone through trauma. And so you're actually super tight. And so to even get back to even regular flexibility it took a lot of work. But as time has gone on for me on the physical level, to me, as we age, and I turn 71 in 2 months from this, when we're recording this, it's ever more vital that all three be focused, that I focus on all three areas. Absolutely strength. A lot of people as we age don't focus on strength because I don't want to lift weights, or I don't want to do the grumpy voice. And I'm not saying you got to lift weights, but if you're not keeping strength up, your muscles do get weaker. It's just part of the aging process. However, when you're working them and regaining strength, it's amazing how much you can regain. So it's not like, oh, well, I'll still feel crummy. No, not true.
Not true.
Not true. You got to put in some work, absolutely, and you got to be consistent with it. So the strength is a big deal. Balance is a huge deal. My mother fell, and she passed a number of years ago, but before that, she fell going around the sofa, and we're not sure exactly why she fell. She ended up breaking a hip. That's very common as people age. You don't have the balance you once had. Some of that could be you're not eating right, too much sugar still, or whatever. But some of that is that the muscles have atrophied that would normally, when we were younger, keep us balanced. Or you can slightly lose your balance, but you catch yourself.
Yeah.
And then
Yes.
if your muscles are strong, you catch yourself and there's not a problem. As we age, you can't catch yourself. And the muscles that you're falling into, like quad muscles or whatever, aren't as strong. So they give out. So a bad thing can happen. So the balance and the strength are kind of, and again, not feeling like, oh, I got to be a bodybuilder. He's saying I got to start being a bodybuilder. Did I say anything about being a bodybuilder? Not at all. But in order to, on that level, on those levels, be effective. And flexibility is also underappreciated. Yes, I have done yoga for 50 years. And thank God I have learned those skills when I was young, because there's no way I would be doing some of the things that my body is capable of doing now were I not staying flexible. So it's, to me, it's the triad, the troika of all three that are kind of equally important as we age. You don't want to not have strength. It's not just about being flexible and being able to twist your body into strange yoga postures. That's great, but without strength and balance, all the flexibility in the world is not going to give you the strength you need when you need it, or the balance. So they really complement each other. And then I started thinking, well, as our careers, our life as a whole are relevant to these three concepts. To me, a strong career, I mean, you cited how all the different things that I've done in my life. Some people would say, he's clearly a dabbler. He's clearly a dilettante.
I've been accused of that too.
Yeah, I bet. Exactly. On the other hand, when I think of the ageism in the workplace that can happen, the fact that I know how to do at a fairly high level a lot of different things is really important. There's a number of reasons why people might want to work with me, regardless of my age. So there's flexibility. I have learned flexibility, and so that's much more interesting to people. Like he's adaptable. He knows how to adapt. Not just his body is flexible, but he knows how to move through things because he learned how to manage stress and not have stress overwhelm you all the time. So from a career standpoint, from the doing work we love, no matter what age we're at, these qualities of having strength in what we know and having kind of pillars, foundations of things that we have done is part of it. Having the balance in our career. I have a strange, I mean, you wouldn't necessarily look at my resume from the eyes of balance, but it is kind of oddly balanced. I mean, I've worked in academia a lot, and yet it's not like that comfortable a place for me. I've worked in healthcare a lot. It's a very comfortable place for me because I've been operated on enough. I've had enough treatments. I've known enough nurses and doctors in very intimate ways, thanks to the surgeries I've had. So I'm comfortable there, more than some people. But again, I think my point in these three is that the strength, balance, and flexibility are not just about our physical body, but yes, they are as we age. And I think too many of us, and I've noticed this in my own process, especially in the even still post-COVID, sitting too much on Zoom.
Yeah.
And so that shortens muscles. And so you stand up and you feel a pain. Oh man, and then you don't want to walk that night because you're feeling the pain. And then it becomes a vicious cycle. And then the next morning you don't want to get up to go to the gym because you don't want to feel the pain of stretching. And then you get more pain because you're not stretching, you're not exercising the muscles properly, and you don't realize, oh, I'm doing this to myself. And you're and as focused as I've been in this dimension for the last dozens of years, especially post surgeries, I still find myself doing that sometimes. And I think, what about the poor people that didn't learn what I learned, haven't had the life experience? How are they not just confined to their easy chair all the time, which of course so many people do? So yes, it's important for health, but to me, it's more about our life in general.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to stretch this a little bit more because I like this phrase: be stronger, be more flexible, and work on balance. And I'm thinking of it from the perspective of learning. I'm very huge I'm a lifelong learner. I never stop learning. And I'm thinking these are things that also have kept me, I hope, a valuable and interesting coach. I work on always learning new things. To me, that's part of that strengthening. You're strengthening your knowledge base. The flexibility means I have to listen very carefully, because if I'm not listening to that person, I won't see their perspective. And I have to be able to shift and see life from their perspective. So I have to be flexible about that, even when it may be different than what I see. And this aspect of balance, gosh, you sometimes you really have to weigh two things and say where is it that the I won't say the truth, I would say where are the possibilities between those two issues. So I just love this now applied to the mental aspect.
Those are great add-ons. I love that. I think that's the point. And I love when you said you're a lifelong learner. Uh, it was in the post surgeries when I was no longer CEO, and I hired a personal trainer, and I hired a voice coach, and I was going to these dance things every week and learning about my emotions. I would be in the middle of a dance and I would feel grief for my mother who had just passed away 2 years earlier. And I didn't know that was in there. I didn't know I was still feeling it, and yet something in the music and something in the dance brought it out of me. So I was learning about myself is the point of this. And so I think that is such an important quality. And like I have fun learning what my body can do at almost 71. And people look at me in the gym, and I can get down into a yoga squat, no problem, and I can pop back up, no problem. And I can look like I'm a martial artist, going from one lunge to another, and I can kind of impress people. And they think I'm 50, and then they say, "You're 71, and you're a guy doing that? Wait a minute, that's not a thing." And I'm saying, I don't mind showing off a little bit here and there. But my point being, it's fun to examine and test what am I actually capable of. It's easy to tell ourselves, I can't do that. I'm too old now. My body's not good. My body cannot do what Bruce can do. Well, when I was having my hips replaced, do you think I had any idea I could ever do a yoga squat or some of that stuff that I can now do? It took. So my point being, uh, lifelong learner means about ourself too.
Yes. Yes.
As you're saying, I mean, I'm not saying you weren't
No,
saying
no,
that.
no. I
Applying to what can I learn about a skill that maybe I could actually learn and also be awesome at. What if that's possible? And the answer is, of course, it's possible. How many examples do we need?
Yeah.
So I love that add-on, those add-ons that you just made.
Thank you. Well, one of the questions that uh, I always have teenagers look at what we're going to be talking about, and I ask them to
Yeah, I love that.
what's it. And I think you probably have answered this somewhat, but I'm going to ask their question anyway. What specific lessons have you learned from overcoming your health issues?
What specific lessons? Boy, a lot. To be totally honest, when I was diagnosed with cancer, I'd had symptoms for a while, and I didn't want to believe it was serious. And then come to find out I had a tumor, and it was large and it was cancerous. So paying attention to symptoms, paying attention to niggly voices, paying attention. You highlighted the word friction earlier. Paying attention to how much friction is going on in myself. What am I hiding, etc. That was a big one. Um, I I was blessed with an incredible support system. My family, I was in the HeartMath organization, so a lot of people were caring, very caring about my health and that I would come through everything well. So why that is so important on every level, and I don't have that in the same way now, and so certain things are more challenging. So I had to call upon another level of inner resource, divine resource, etc., in order to do that. Another thing was that, especially because of the dramatic nature of what I went through, two back-to-back life-threatening conditions, I had staph infections in my blood on top of the cancer. Um, every now and then, something would be really bothering me, and my higher self, my memory will say, "Dude, you have survived two life-threatening conditions, reinvented yourself multiple times, moved across country, released an album of original songs, and you hadn't even ever written a song. And you're letting this email ruin your week. Really? Really? That's the best you can do? You got to show me more than that." So I have to kind of take a lesson from my own life from time to time and realize, as gnarly as it all sounded to people who hear all the story, I did live through it, and I got through it, and I'm healthy, and I have a mostly very positive attitude. So knowing that as dark as something can be when you're in it, and as much despair as you could feel when you're in it, um, later on, and you realize you made it through, please keep remembering you made it through that very dark time. That's a big one.
It is a huge one. I often tell people when I'm working with them with resilience, I keep telling them, think of a moment or a time when you did have to overcome something, and they start thinking about those. They may be small things or they may be big things, like what you just described. Just showing themselves the evidence that they have done it before builds within them capacity to keep on going. So I love that example. Thank you for that. Mm.
And I think too, the phrase health is, if we don't have our health, we don't have anything, or health is the greatest wealth. Those are all kind of platitudes to me in a certain way, until you go through it. And like even today, I have no major issues going on in my body. Not knock on wood. And yet there'll be aches and pains
Mm-hmm.
that could drain me for a period of time,
Mm-hmm.
and cause me to lose motivation about something for a period of time. And so I actually really do understand why that is so. Why health is so fundamental. That if we're not feeling strong, if we're not feeling balanced, if we're not being flexible with life, life gets so much harder.
So
It's
much.
we always feel weak. We always feel rigid because life's not going to perform to our liking. Well, maybe you're the one who needs to learn flexibility instead of expecting life to somehow conveniently dance to your tune. Maybe life is trying to show you, hey, learn to dance, learn to flex, learn to go with the flow, and
Yeah.
then maybe life will get a lot easier instead
Mm.
of thinking it's got to be my way or the highway.
Yeah.
Well, life doesn't seem to act that way.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Not ever. Well,
Yeah.
you have created and developed something called NeuroAcrobatics. I wonder if you'd talk about that, because you use that, I believe, with leaders and elite performers.
Yes, well, and to be clear, I work with that system. I love it so much. I'm not the creator. It was developed by someone named Sage Rader, who's a brilliant artist, musician, writer. Also got deep into studying health through something called biohacking. What are the shortcuts to having great health, and developed a whole system for the breath, brain, body system, as he calls it, which he named NeuroAcrobatics. And it's kind of like mental gymnastics for our breath, for our brain, our body, using curated music and imagination to kind of transform certain things. And I've had the opportunity to teach it now to uh, super successful law firms, consultants, athletes, executives of all types of stripes, and it's a marvelous system to help us learn how to reset. The term reset has gotten more and more popular over the last few decades because we all have to reset our computers, reset our watches, etc. But moment by moment, we often need to reset our nervous system because we've gotten overwhelmed. An email has really annoyed us. And so our bodies have been flooded with the biochemistry of fight or flight while reading an email. But our body has just produced 1,400 biochemicals, let's say. Well, those biochemicals are not going to be spent in an actual fight. What happened was you're reading an email, and you've gotten all worked up.
Mm.
What are you now going to do? Are you going to fight the email? Are you going to punch the screen? What are you going to do? Because your body is now filled with the chemistry of fight or flee. So are you going to run out of your office now and spend all those biochemicals? So most people don't do that. So we need to reset. We need to say, okay, that happened. I'm not a bad person that I had that reaction. It's life. However, if I don't change, if I don't reinvent myself in this moment, the bad mood from that email is going to carry into the meeting I've got in 10 minutes and cause me to maybe say something that wasn't so smart or insensitive or inappropriate. So it can become this, vicious cycle, kind of downhill. So neuroacrobatics takes the approach that there's simple ways how we breathe, and we use this very fun style of music. It's actually for the younger audience, your teenagers, they would know it. Lo-fi beats. Lo-fi meaning it's not trying to sound super high fidelity. It's a style of music that we all hear these days, but you may not have known the name. And beats means it's always got a beat. So it's not just sort of spacey new age
Right.
music, not at all. It's got a beat, so you still feel alive.
Mm-hmm.
You don't feel like you've been sort of dissolved out into the cosmos somehow. So the music is very intentional. The breath practices are very intentional to help us kind of learn how to reset, because most of us have dozens of interruptions a day or dozens of trigger moments a day. And those trigger moments when we react to something are also biochemical in nature. And the biochemicals we're producing, had it been something we actually needed to fight against, we would spend those biochemicals in the fight, but we don't have a fight. So where do they go? They stay floating around in your bloodstream, depressing immune function, tiring us out. And the common malady of 21st century is sleep disorders.
Mm.
A lot of that is replaying the thing that annoyed them earlier in the day and the biochemistry of it. You're feeling it again. You're feeling again. And who can sleep when that's going on?
Ah,
So
this is,
neuroacrobatics is a kind of simple, fun
yeah.
approach to learning how to take control of that system. And the style of music is an intentional choice, because it's kind of like you're in a fun lounge, just talking, having a conversation with friends. It's got a casual. It's not like, oh, I went to a retreat in the mountains somewhere, and I have to be Mr. Yogi or something. It's not that at all. It's more like it's just yourself hanging out, enjoying, learning something about yourself.
I'm sitting here absolutely stunned. I have I have a small piece of music that I found 20 years ago. Um, and I loved it so much that I actually wrote to the author and I said, I would like to have permission to use this. And he was very gracious. I said, I'll pay you whatever, because I believe that musicians should live. He said, don't worry about it. You can use it. And it's a very upbeat piece. So whenever I really have to, just reset, I love that word, reset, I play it. And it's so pervasive and has such a beat to it that I can't get through that without feeling a release. Yeah. Sometimes I dance, but that just depends on the time.
Well, to me, Madeline, what you have just said is a huge secret that we all know. So it's not really a secret, but the power of music that we love. It doesn't matter the style; it
No,
really doesn't.
that's right.
There's research that says if you love heavy metal and you really love it, it's still going to have a positive effect on it, even though it could pretty much kill somebody else because they hate it, and that would be a negative experience for them. But if you love it enough, the
Yeah.
loving of it
Mm,
can be transformative. And I can't tell you how many times in my life, I mean, it's probably thousands, where a track of music came on. Sometimes I intentionally put on a certain track because, just like you said, I want to feel a certain way. And so that music, that beat, like there's this one it's by a group called Bliss, actually, but it's got a terrific beat, and I start scat singing it, same while I'm driving. I do this, and I can drive for hours having the song on repeat because there's just a certain attitude that's like, I love how this makes me feel. So music is transformative in so many ways, and I think we forget this. Sure, we may have a favorite song that touches our heart, or favorite song, and yours was a great example. But to me, it's like, why are we not doing it every day? Not necessarily playing the same song every day, but allowing the language of music, the emotional sensitivity of the
mhm,
musicians and the artists who created it, be alive in you for a moment and see what happens.
mhm,
And I mean, I listen to music within the first half hour of being awake, not the same time one every day, not at all.
mhm.
So that's, to me, that's a big deal relative to everything we're talking about: the reinvention, the strength, flexibility, and balance. music can facilitate all that. If you're having a good time while you're exercising,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people listen to music when they're out walking
Yeah,
because it's fun to listen, right? So let's not forget music. Music's a game changer.
it's a game changer. Hmm. Bruce, as we've been talking this time, uh, we haven't really addressed fully why you chose that phrase, Renaissance human. I'm really curious about that because we certainly have heard the term Renaissance used many times, but to attach it to that word human, I like it. Talk about that, would you?
Sure. So in my post-surgery period, within the first 7 or 8 months of the hip surgeries, which were after the cancer, I had started singing again, and then I started dancing again. And simultaneously, I'd been doing more photography with my smartphone. And this kept unfolding. And within 6 months of starting to work with my buddy Gary Malkin, we were performing in front of 500 frontline health professionals from Kaiser, doing this 2 hour a keynote performance called What Makes Your Heart Sing. So there was all this creativity going on and creative expression. And we were designing performances, not just creating speeches. And it was so much more fun. And one day somebody called me and said, "Are you free 3 o'clock? We want to discuss that consulting thing." And I said, "Oh, I have to rehearse at 3." And when I said I have to rehearse, it felt so good compared to saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm in another meeting." It's like rehearse. Oh, that's fun. That's going to lead to something that'll give joy to others. It'll be entertaining. And so there was this energy going on in me. And within a couple of years, a lot of people that knew me were like, "Wow, you're like into this all of a sudden. We didn't even know you could sing, or we didn't even know you could dance, or whatever." And so I was starting to hear this phrase applied to me, Renaissance man. You're a Renaissance man. And and they meant, you're kind of opening up to these creative parts of yourself, and you went through some life-threatening situations, and you're kind of reborn. You made it through. And the fact that I kept hearing it, and it kept sort of popping up in different things, I thought, huh, interesting. And then I thought, well, I don't want to just call what I've gone through. Now I'm a Renaissance man, because to me that was always sort of an elitist term of, people who had the education to be a highly skilled lawyer and concert pianist and artist, whatever. It didn't feel like every man or every woman could achieve it. I thought, so I pondered this for a while, and then one day this term Renaissance human occurred to me. And as soon as I kind of thought it and then said it out loud, I thought, that feels like it now applies to everyone. And then I thought more, what do I mean by this? If I'm going to come up with this term, what do I mean by it? And I went back to the root of Renaissance, which is to be born again, to give birth again. And I thought, well, that's what I went through. I was like giving birth again to the capacity to sing, the capacity to dance. In the case of photography, I'd never been a photographer. It was like that was more like a new birth. But birth, there was like all this new birth. And I realized one day, like I said earlier to you, I wanted to be a learner again. I wanted to learn, not just always be a teacher or a workshop leader or speaker or whatever else. And so more and more, I began to ponder this, and I thought, what makes humans as a species completely unique on planet Earth, as far as I know, is that we have the ability, and it's designed into us, to continue to give birth to new parts of ourselves throughout our lives. Not only in the first 20 years of life, where so many things are being born and are growing and are developing, and we're getting good at this and that and this and that. It's not only, and then it stops. No, that's not how it actually is. That energy to create and to contribute does not die unless we allow it to die. Some of those aspects of my life, I had stopped singing. It was nobody's fault. I stopped singing. I had stopped dancing. Nobody said, don't dance anymore. I stopped. Life changed. And then one day I realized, I miss it so much. How did I let that happen? So the Renaissance human is to say, I believe we're all this way. We're not all necessarily going to be dancers, singers, photographers, but that doesn't assure a great life either. That's what I love to do. It doesn't mean you do or anybody else does. It's more about, how do we live fully? And that means the ability to continue to explore, to continue to develop, to take the pottery class, not because you're supposed to become a potter, but because in that process of learning and working with stuff in a new way, you're going to experience things in yourself you've never experienced before, I guarantee it. And isn't that what life's about? To get to keep experiencing and giving birth to new parts of ourselves. And so that's what Renaissance human is to me, is that we are all Renaissance human. It's not just the artist. It's not the elite. It's not, you have to have a certain education. Not at all. It's the opposite. We're born with the power to create life. So why wouldn't we have the power to recreate our own life?
Mm. Thank you for that. It's that's more than an admonition. It's a release for me, because I always think about everyone as a resilient leader within themselves.
Yes.
We just have to bring it out and nurture it. So, Bruce Cryer, thank you so much. This has been wonderful.
My
How
pleasure.
many-
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. It occurs to me, we never tell people how to get in touch with you. So why don't we do that for sure this time?
Sure. I have a website, cleverly named brucecryer.com. Cryer is the spelling for those who don't have it. My email address, if you want to reach out to me that way, very cleverly, brucecryer@gmail.com. That's it. So those are your two best options. You can Google me. You'll find all kinds of YouTube videos, YouTube channel. I'm on major social sites, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok.
Great.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Every now and then, there is something that changes how I think about the world. Grounds for Thought is a place where I talk about these moments so that you can explore the meaning for yourself. The idea of reinventing oneself could make you think you have to toss out something or leave something behind, or you have to start from scratch. All are disheartening. But I have reinvented myself several times over the course of my career. As a result, I have learned in the process that all the things I knew, all the things I liked, all the skills I had come along with came along with me as I walked through the door into reinvention. That doesn't mean that you have all the knowledge or skills that you need for the new place, but the old ones are still around. I've always been happy to know that I could shift my direction without the world coming to an end. And in fact, it's one of the aspects of resilience, that when you encounter the unexpected and you choose the next step, you believe you have what it takes to take that step. For example, my very first job as a professional was as a research mathematician at the Franklin Institute Research Labs. After I left the job, I never did mathematics as a professional, but I have always used my math to help me analyze situations, interpret data, understand the real problem, discover how pieces fit together. It's an amazing framework for thinking. That's why I want to talk about the joy I experienced as I read through David Epstein's book, Range, Why Generalists, Why Generalists Triumph in a Specialized World. Let me show you the cover of that book. It's Range. For those who have read it, you know that the book begins with a detailed comparison of Tiger Woods and Roger Federer, two famous champions, one learning golf from the very earliest age, the other playing many sports, and finally gravitating to tennis. I very much appreciated the clear examples so that the reader was never unclear about the difference between the specialist, Woods, and the generalist, Federer. This opening was powerful, setting the overall message of the book most clearly. But for me, one of the most interesting pieces was when he talked about kind versus wicked learning environments. The kind learning environment is one that gives you rapid, accurate, and clear feedback as to the correctness of the action taken or the incorrectness. When I was a computer programmer, I loved that the machine was clear, rapid, and accurate when you fed it a mistake in your code. The results came out wrong or not what you expected, or even just gave you nothing. It may take some time to determine the issue, but you knew when it was right in the end. A child learning to walk knows when the process is working and when she finds herself face down on the floor. Same kind of learning. In contrast, wicked learning environments are ones that are sincerely less clear. They can give ambiguous signals. They can give inconsistent results. This is precisely where most life issues arise. And this is where having a broad background across different topics, various skill areas, multiple contexts, offer different ways to explore the real issues and find a solution. With this in mind, I look to see if the team has all the information it needs to do its work. That is to say, does it have the necessary fertilizer? I also look to see if the team has enough exposure to shifting business challenges. That is to say, does it have enough sun? Does it have enough support so that time is allowed to resolve issues? That's to say, does it have enough water? Gardening acts as a framework for my thinking. There are other frameworks as well. My experience with the tech industry informed how I thought about teaching in academia, not for how to use the technology, but rather how to discover students' needs as if they were customers. Without my other frames of reference, I would spend my time investigating individual performance when, with a team, it is the workings of a whole that is the performance unit. As I began to absorb the concept of wicked learning, I saw a confirmation of my research on resilience, where being comfortable in uncomfortable situations is an essential skill. A wicked problem is never comfortable. It may be fun, exciting, but never comfortable. To address an uncomfortable issue, you need to get your mind comfortable with the discomfort before you can bring your best thinking to the issue. Maybe that's why we work to nurture our resilience, because it turns out that as we address unexpected situations, we develop resilience even more. It's wicked learning. In the end, problems are solved through understanding, broad knowledge, and careful thinking. What frameworks do you depend on when examining a problem? Have you used them to their fullest? Check it out. Range Why Generalists Triumph in a Specialized World by David Epstein. There's more to this book, but this should suffice to entice you for more. I hope you've enjoyed this show today and that you learned something in it and through it. And if you have, and you're on YouTube, please click the like button and by all means subscribe so that you won't miss any of the great conversations that we have with my guests. I'm Madeline Blair, wishing you infinite possibilities as you unlock your resilience.